In September 1993, Elisa Claps, a high school student from Potenza, Italy, disappeared mysteriously. She remained missing for almost 20 years, last seen at the Holy Trinity Church in her hometown where she had gone to meet an acquaintance. This case underlines a disturbing truth. Those with criminal intent can often hide in plain sight, blending seamlessly into society without drawing attention to themselves. These individuals might appear ordinary and unremarkable, yet they possess a chilling ability to erase their traces, complicating efforts by law enforcement to solve crimes and capture them. As a result, they might remain free to continue their nefarious activities for years. Elisa Maria Claps was born on January 21, 1977, in the quaint mountainous town of Potenza in southern Italy. As the youngest of three children, she was raised in a modest household. Her mother was a clerk, and her father owned a small tobacco shop. Elisa and her two older brothers, Gildo and Luciano, were brought up in a strict, devoutly religious environment. Their family was a regular at Sunday church services, a testament to their deep-rooted faith. From a young age, Elisa was a bright and dedicated student with aspirations of becoming a doctor. Her ambition was fueled by a genuine desire to aid those in need. Those who knew her described Elisa as exceedingly kind, compassionate, and sociable. Her trusting nature and inherent optimism led her to see the best in people, traits that endeared her to many. Elisa's ability to forge new friendships was remarkable, and she was well liked in her community. By the time she reached 16, Elisa had become quite popular, particularly among her male classmates. Her striking appearance, characterized by a warm smile and long flowing hair, did not go unnoticed. However, rooted in her religious upbringing, she declined any romantic propositions, focusing instead on her educational goals. During the early summer of 1993, Elisa caught the attention of Danilo Restivo, a local man whose interest in her quickly escalated into an unsettling obsession. Despite her polite rejections, Restivo's advances grew increasingly insistent. This marked the beginning of a distressing period for Elisa as she navigated the unwanted attention from someone who refused to respect her boundaries. Danilo, 5 years Elisa's senior, was surrounded by disconcerting rumors that wafted through Potenza, painting him as a man best avoided. Despite her innate kindness, Elisa tried to maintain a distance from him. Danilo often tried to coax her into secluded spots whenever opportunity arose. Her polite nature unfortunately seemed to feed his misconceptions, as he interpreted her gentle demeanor as a sign of subtle encouragement. Elisa's concerns about Danilo were candidly recorded in her personal journal. She confessed that his presence unnerved her, yet she couldn't help but feel a twinge of sympathy for him. She described him as a lonely and troubled soul, which led her to always respond to him with kindness, albeit ensuring she was never alone with him. During their interactions, she would swiftly find an excuse to depart, often citing urgent errands. In mid-August, the Claps family escaped to Monte Giordano, a tranquil seaside town, for a vacation. While enjoying a leisurely walk with her brother Gildo, Elisa's calm was shattered as Danilo appeared ahead. She clutched Gildo's hand tightly, a silent plea for him not to leave her side. Danilo approached, feigning familiarity, and asked for Elisa's help with a vague errand. Gildo, sensing the tension, quickly fabricated a reason to whisk his sister away and later inquired about her fearful reaction to Danilo. Elisa revealed to Gildo that Danilo had been following her, admitting that although he had not physically harmed her, his presence filled her with dread. On September 11th, around 5 p.m., their calm household was disrupted by a phone call. Elisa answered, her face falling into lines of worry as the conversation progressed. Her brother noted her growing distress with concern. After she hung up, Gildo pressed her about the caller. Elisa reluctantly disclosed it was Danilo. When Gildo offered to confront him, Elisa resisted, insisting on handling the situation herself. She was determined not to escalate matters and was confident she could manage. On the morning of Sunday, September 12, 1993, Elisa's family set off early for a day trip to Naples, roughly 90 miles from their hometown of Potenza. Elisa, however, chose to stay back as she planned to attend the morning service at her local church with her close friend, Elena. They intended to return to Elisa's home for lunch after the service. Around 10:30 a.m., Elisa left her home and walked towards the church. By noon, her family was back from Naples, and her mother began preparing lunch, expecting the girls to arrive soon. However, as time ticked past, there was no sign of Elisa and Elena. At 1:45 p.m., Elena appeared at the Claps' doorstep, visibly anxious. She inquired if Elisa had returned, explaining that they had separated at the church and she lost sight of Elisa. Her uneasy demeanor and shaky story raised suspicions. Under the family's probing, Elena's story crumbled. She confessed that after the church service, Elisa had stayed behind to talk with the young man, planning only a brief conversation before meeting Elena at the park to head for lunch together. But Elisa never arrived at the park, not after 10 minutes, nor after an hour. Pressed further, Elena disclosed the young man's identity. It was Danilo. This revelation alarmed Gildo, who immediately sensed the gravity of the situation and urged his family to initiate a search for Elisa, fearing for her safety. Who exactly was Danilo Restivo? Born on April 3, 1972, in Eris, a small commune in Sicily's Trapani province, Danilo was the youngest child of a relatively affluent family. Spoiled from a young age, he grew accustomed to having his desires fulfilled without repercussions, developing a sense of impunity regarding his actions. This background hints at a troubling predisposition that may have influenced his later behavior, deeply concerning Elisa's family as they pieced together her last known interactions. Danilo's father was unwavering in his defense of his son, regardless of the trouble Danilo found himself in. In the early 1980s, the Restivo family relocated to Potenza, where Danilo's father, Maurizio, established a lucrative business. Within a short period, Maurizio ascended to become one of the most affluent and influential figures in the city, forming strong ties with local law enforcement and governmental bodies. Throughout his school years, Danilo's behavior was markedly abnormal and unsettling. He was known to be rude, aggressively odd, and notably cruel, especially towards animals, a dark inclination that appeared to gratify him perversely. Additionally, his fascination with sharp objects became widely known after he was caught multiple times spying on girls in locker rooms. Despite various attempts at intervention, his behavior persisted with a disturbingly stubborn tenacity. Danilo was an isolated figure among his peers, with no close friends, often seen carrying scissors, which he used to snip locks of hair from girls without their knowledge. Despite numerous complaints from concerned parents, his alarming actions remained largely unchecked. At home, Danilo's collection of hair clippings grew, yet his family overlooked these signs of deeper issues, dismissing them as mere child's play. As Danilo matured, his unsettling tendencies worsened. His actions escalated from animal cruelty to deriving pleasure from inflicting pain on people. He struggled with social interactions, displaying particularly aggressive behavior towards females, often trying to intimidate or harm them. The pattern of disturbing behavior was evident in his interactions with a younger cousin named Sonia, who was about a year and a half younger than him. They attended the same school and frequently walked home together. Despite his frequent attempts to lure her to secluded spots under various pretexts, Sonia remained cautious. Her mother had explicitly warned her to never go anywhere alone with him, advice that Sonia heeded, aware of the potential danger posed by her cousin. In the spring of 1987, Danilo managed to entice Sonia to explore a secret hideout he claimed to know. Suspicious of his intentions, Sonia decided to bring her 11-year-old brother, Angelo, for safety. The trio walked to a secluded wooded area where an old, abandoned shack was hidden among the trees. Danilo proposed a game that involved blindfolding each other, and trusting him momentarily, Sonia and Angelo consented. Once blindfolded, a tense silence enveloped the group. Feeling uneasy, Sonia adjusted her blindfold enough to glance out and was horrified to see Danilo pulling a pair of scissors from his backpack, advancing towards Angelo with a menacing intent. Reacting quickly, Sonia screamed, disrupting the silence and startling Angelo, who was still blindfolded. Startled by Sonia's scream, Angelo instinctively moved just as Danilo swung the scissors, narrowly escaping a potentially lethal strike. Instead, the blade slashed across Angelo's shoulder, drawing blood. The sight of blood and Sonia's screams momentarily stunned Danilo, allowing the siblings a critical moment to escape. Panicked, Sonia and Angelo fled the shack, their screams reverberating through the woods. Danilo pursued them briefly, hurling threats and demanding their silence. Driven by terror and survival instincts, the siblings managed to outrun Danilo and reach safety. Their parents were horrified upon seeing Angelo's injuries and immediately took him to the hospital. Thanks to timely medical intervention, Angelo's life was spared after a perilous loss of blood. The assault prompted Angelo's parents to file a police report against Danilo for attempted assault with deadly intent. However, the case was quickly dismissed, purportedly due to the influence wielded by Danilo's father. Mr. Restivo, along with the support of a local priest, assured Angelo's family that Danilo would be sent to a psychiatric facility for mandatory therapy, an arrangement that hinted at the extent of the Restivo family's local clout. Following the attack on Angelo, Mr. Maurizio Restivo not only covered the medical expenses, but also paid a substantial sum to the family as compensation. Despite these gestures, Sonia and Angelo's parents, unsettled by the proximity to danger, decided to relocate their family to Naples to avoid further contact with Danilo. Contrary to his solemn promises, Danilo's father never followed through on his commitment to seek psychiatric help for his son. Danilo did not receive the promised treatment. He never visited a specialist for evaluation. Maurizio was concerned that a formal psychiatric assessment might diagnose his son as mentally unstable or a potential danger to the community, a situation that could tarnish his own prestigious social standing. Throughout his teenage years, Danilo's behavior led to his expulsion from 4 different schools due to continuous complaints about his threatening demeanor towards other students. Eventually, Danilo completed his education through homeschooling and managed to obtain his diploma. At the age of 18, he was drafted for military service, deemed fit to serve, but his tenure was short-lived. Danilo was discharged from military service within a few months due to his erratic and unpredictable behavior. Back under his father's roof, he was shielded from consequences by his father's influence and wealth. Over time, Danilo's actions grew increasingly concerning. He began to stalk and spy on girls he was infatuated with, watching them through their windows and making eerie, silent phone calls late at night. His expressions of romantic interest were disturbingly aggressive. He attempted to cut locks of hair from the heads of girls he admired and lured them to isolated spots. When these advances were rebuffed, Danilo escalated to sending his rejectors packages with fake explosive devices and letters that outlined his dark fantasies. Despite numerous complaints, no legal action stuck. Danilo's father consistently intervened, protecting his son from any repercussions. This perpetual shielding made Danilo feel untouchable, invulnerable to the law. To those who didn't know him well, Danilo might seem merely eccentric, a harmless oddity rather than the manipulative threat he truly was. This facade of harmlessness elicited misplaced sympathy from individuals like Elisa, who saw a troubled soul and felt a compassionate urge to help. Upon realizing Elisa was missing, her family initiated a frantic search, starting with the local church, the last place she was known to be. Her friends shared that Elisa intended to meet Danilo Restivo there to ask him to stop pursuing her. Several witnesses at the church confirmed seeing Elisa speaking with Danilo, but none could provide details on their whereabouts afterward. Elisa's mother, increasingly worried, tried contacting the Restivo home to speak directly with Danilo. Instead, she reached his father, Maurizio, who flatly denied her the opportunity to talk to his son. The Claps family then drove to the Restivo residence, but no one answered the door. Left with no other options, they reported Elisa missing to the authorities. When law enforcement arrived at the Restivo home, Maurizio claimed Danilo had traveled to Naples on errands and wouldn't return until the next day. However, the police quickly ascertained that Danilo was actually at home. They returned to the residence, this time insisting on taking Danilo in for questioning, despite Maurizio's attempts to block them. At the police station, Danilo's account of the day's events was fraught with inconsistencies. He admitted to meeting Elisa at the church, but claimed that she left shortly after while he stayed behind to pray. His narrative was vague, filled with contradictions, and his visible nervousness did little to affirm his honesty. Furthermore, Danilo was unable to account for his movements after leaving the church, or to produce the clothes he wore that day, raising suspicions that he may have disposed of them. The police discovered a pair of Danilo's shoes soaking in bleach at his house, suggesting an attempt to destroy forensic evidence. This finding was compounded by the discovery of a fresh, suspicious cut on Danilo's hand. He explained it as an accident, claiming he had tripped and cut himself on something sharp after leaving the church, but he couldn't specify where this incident supposedly occurred. This cut appeared to be inflicted by a sharp object, casting further doubt on his already shaky story. Despite the mounting evidence and Danilo's evasive responses, his father quickly intervened to shield him, leveraging his influence to protect his son from the escalating investigation. Upon realizing the gravity of the situation, Maurizio Restivo swiftly retained 2 top defense lawyers from Naples to represent Danilo. This development complicated the investigation for the police, who then sought authorization from the city's chief prosecutor to search Danilo's home and seize potential evidence, including his clothing and footwear. Despite substantial indicators of Danilo's involvement in Elisa's disappearance, the chief prosecutor exhibited a notable lack of urgency. He denied the request for a search warrant for both Danilo's residence and the church where Elisa was last seen. The search that was conducted at the church was merely cursory, and Father Domenico Sabia, the main priest, staunchly refused access to a locked room upstairs, which was secured with a padlock on a wooden staircase. The prosecutor's refusal to issue a thorough warrant for the church and its adjacent rooms raised eyebrows, especially given Father Domenico's peculiar references to Elisa in the past tense, suggesting he believed her to be deceased. 3 weeks into the investigation, local media coverage spotlighted Danilo as the key suspect, broadcasting his photograph across the region. This exposure led to a flood of calls to the police station from women recounting similar experiences of being stalked and harassed by Danilo. These callers detailed his peculiar fixation with women's hair and recounted incidents where he had attempted to cut strands of hair from women in public places such as streets, parks, and public transport. The sustained efforts of investigators eventually led to Danilo being charged with providing false statements in the spring of 1995. He received a sentence of 2.5 years in prison, but served less than 2 months before his sentence was commuted to community service, ironically at the same church from which Elisa had vanished. The investigation into Elisa's disappearance remained stagnant until 1999, when a breakthrough occurred following the arrest of a leader of a criminal organization. Although initially unrelated to Elisa's case, the criminal divulged critical information implicating the city's chief prosecutor in corruption, including accepting bribes and intentionally obstructing investigations. These claims, although considered hearsay and leading to defamation charges against the informant, triggered a significant overhaul in the case. A new prosecutor and lead investigator were appointed, marking a fresh start in the pursuit of justice for Elisa. Finally granted the search warrant for Danilo's house, investigators delved into his possessions, although they couldn't locate the clothing and shoes he had worn on the day Elisa vanished. Instead, they unearthed a disturbing collection. Danilo had accumulated many strands of hair from various girls, meticulously stored in his room. This finding, while didn't directly advance the investigation into Elisa's whereabouts, further scrutiny revealed a hidden large box under Danilo's bed containing photographs of women, both nude and semi-nude, which Danilo had taken without consent in places like locker rooms, fitting rooms, and through residential windows. Danilo was caught red-handed on the street holding scissors and stalking a young woman with the intention of cutting a lock of her hair. Police detained him, checked his identification, and searched his vehicle, where they uncovered a chilling collection: a set of knives, a change of clothes, and extra pairs of shoes in the trunk. This disturbing find, coupled with his recent behavior, provided the police sufficient grounds to secure a search warrant for his home. The search at Danilo Restivo's residence revealed horrifying evidence. Investigators found several albums filled with locks of hair he had collected from various women. In his bathroom, they discovered clothes and sneakers soaking in a tub filled with bleach. But the most incriminating piece of evidence was the set of Heather Barnett's missing keys found in Restivo's bedroom. Although the bleach had severely damaged any blood traces on the clothing, making them unidentifiable, police found Danilo's DNA on a towel in Heather's bathroom, suggesting he had used it to wipe blood spatter from his face. This breakthrough tied him directly to Heather's murder scene. As authorities dug deeper into Heather Barnett's murder, they unearthed disturbing details about Danilo's past. 9 years earlier, he had been the primary suspect in the disappearance of a high school girl in his hometown. At that time, investigators had lacked sufficient evidence to charge him, and the girl's body had never been found. Now, armed with substantial proof of his violent tendencies and lacking his father's protection, Danilo was tried and convicted of premeditated murder, receiving a 40-year sentence without the possibility of parole. In March 2010, 17 years after Elisa Claps had disappeared, construction workers found her mummified remains in the attic of the church where she had last been seen. The body was hidden behind the door that Father Domenico Sabia had consistently refused to open to investigators. By then, Father Domenico had passed away, leaving unresolved questions about his possible involvement in concealing the crime. Elisa's remains bore chilling resemblances to Heather Barnett's murder. Her chest had been similarly mutilated, and her throat was slashed. Of a violent, intimate assault were evident from the disturbance of her undergarments. Fingerprints and bloodstains on Elisa's decayed clothing matched both her and Restivo, who had injured himself during the attack, further linking him to the horrific crime. In Elisa's clenched hand was found a lock of hair that did not belong to her, a disturbing echo of the evidence discovered at Heather Barnett's murder scene. Danilo Restivo, already serving a 40-year sentence in the UK for Heather's murder, was tried in absentia for Elisa Clapps's murder. Given the overwhelming evidence against him, he was convicted once again and received an additional 30-year prison sentence. Upon completing his term in the UK, he is slated to be